Hey, if you're a voter in Collin County, Texas, you've probably got to look at this November's ballot and thought, wow, that is a long one. Well, you're not wrong. So we're going to break it all down from the really complex tax laws to the local stuff so you can walk into that voting booth feeling totally confident.
So let's just dive right in. I mean, when you're faced with phrases like permanent technical institution infrastructure fund, it's pretty easy for your eyes to glaze over, right? Our goal here is super simple. We're going to cut through all that jargon and give you a clear, straightforward summary of what each item on your ballot is actually all about.
And believe me, it is a big task. This one ballot is asking you to vote on 17, that's right, 17, separate amendments to the Texas Constitution. That is a whole lot of lawmaking. And on top of all that, there's also a local proposition just for you Collin County voters.
To make this all make sense, we've kind of grouped the amendments by theme. We're going to start with the propositions about your taxes. There are a lot of those. Then we'll look at funding for some big state projects. After that, we'll cover justice, rights, and rules. And then finally, we'll get to that local Collin County vote. Ready? Let's do this.
Okay, first up is the biggest and, you could argue, the most complicated section. The 10 propositions that have to do with your taxes. Let's take a look at how these amendments could really affect your wallet.
Now, before we really jump into the specific propositions, we need to get a key term down that you're going to see over and over. Ad valorem tax. It sounds super fancy, but it just means a tax that's based on the assessed value of property. You know, like your house or a business's inventory. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we go.
All right, a major theme this year is basically preventing new taxes from ever happening. 3 different propositions fall right into this category. First, there's Proposition 2, which would prohibit the state from ever creating a tax on individual capital gains. Then you've got Proposition 6, which would block a very specific kind of tax on securities transactions. And finally, Proposition 8 says no to any future death taxes, like an estate or inheritance tax.
Next up, we're talking about property tax exemptions, but for businesses and some pretty special cases. Proposition 5, for example, would exempt animal feed that's just being held for retail sale. Proposition 9 would exempt a chunk of business property that's used to produce income. And Proposition 17 is really specific. It would exempt the value of any border security infrastructure built down in the border counties.
There are also 2 proposed amendments aimed at giving homeowners a little bit of a break, but under very specific circumstances. Proposition 7 authorizes a property tax exemption for the surviving spouse of a veteran who passed away from a service-connected condition. And then there's Proposition 10, which would create a temporary tax break for a home improvement, like, say, a new deck or a sunroom, if it gets completely destroyed in a fire.
Okay, now here's where you gotta pay close attention, because we have 2 different propositions that are both about the school district homestead exemption. Proposition 11 would let the legislature increase the exemption amount, but specifically for homeowners who are elderly or disabled. Meanwhile, Proposition 13 would increase the general exemption for all homeowners, bumping it up from $100,000 to $140,000.
So, that was a lot. To quickly recap those 10, yes, 10 tax propositions. We've got 3 that would prohibit future taxes, 3 that offer exemptions for businesses, and 4 that give some kind of property tax relief to homeowners. This little chart gives you a really clear breakdown.
All right, we are shifting gears now. We're moving away from taxes and into investments. This next set of amendments is all about how Texas is proposing to fund some really big projects for the future.
2 of the propositions here are focused on creating new dedicated state funds. Proposition 1 would create a permanent fund to pay for capital needs, think buildings and equipment, for the Texas State Technical College system. And Proposition 4 would take a slice of the state sales tax revenue and lock it away for the Texas Water Fund to help with infrastructure projects all over the state.
Our next proposition involves a pretty staggering number, $3 billion.
So, where would all that money go? Well, Proposition 14 proposes using that $3 billion to create the Dementia Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. All that cash would go into a brand new fund dedicated to research, prevention, and treatment of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other related disorders.
Okay, moving on from funding, we're at our final group of state constitutional amendments. This section's a little bit of a mix, covering topics that affect how the government works, the justice system, and even individual rights.
Proposition 3 deals directly with the justice system, and specifically with bail. It would actually change the Constitution to require judges to deny bail under certain circumstances. So, as you see here, if someone is accused of certain high-level felonies and a judge finds that specific conditions are met, then denying bail isn't a choice, it's required.
Sticking with the judiciary for a second, Proposition 12 is all about judicial oversight. The goal here is basically to create a more effective process for sanctioning judges if they engage in misconduct. It would do that by making changes to the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, which is the group that investigates and disciplines judges. And finally, we have two propositions that would add what are called declarative statements to the Constitution. Proposition 15 would add language that affirms parents are the primary decision-makers for their own children. And Proposition 16 would add language to clarify that a voter must be a citizen of the United States.
And that's it. That's all 17 state amendments. But hold on, if you're a voter in Collin County, you are not done yet. There is one more item on your ballot that is just for you.
This slide here shows that last local choice you have to make. And this proposition is really a two-for-one deal. It asks you to confirm the creation of the Collin County Emergency Services District No. 1, and it asks you to authorize a property tax to pay for it. So a single vote from you decides both whether the district exists and how it gets its funding.
And that's your entire ballot, from top to bottom. So in short, you're voting on a whole bunch of potential changes to Texas tax laws, creating massive new state funds, making some updates to the justice system, and deciding on a brand new emergency services district right here in Collin County.
We've tried to cut through all that official, confusing language to give you a much clearer picture of what's really at stake with each of these votes. Now the decisions are all yours to make. You've got the info, so how will you help shape the future of Texas?